Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about Steven Erikson's Memories of Ice, the third book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. And okay, so I just want to preface this video with something. This is not a review. These videos, my thoughts, they're titled specifically because this is not a review of the book. Because I don't think a review is necessary of this series. It's good. I like it. It's subjective though. This series is very interesting because it's very difficult. Some people love it, some people can't stand it, and I've seen videos about both sides, and honestly I fall on the side of loving it. And so I'm just going to share my opinions. And in this video, I'm going to mention star ratings. Now, I think that star ratings, at least for me, are very personal things. Star ratings, basically, I have a Storygraph account where once I finish a book, so once I finish this, I go in and I review it with a star rating. That's all I put there, is a star rating. And this book, or the last two books of the series, got 4.5s on that scale. This book, Memories of Ice, got a perfect 5 out of 5. Now, this is the book I have the most to complain about. I have the most problems structurally and narratively and character-wise with this book. It's just that the things that I enjoyed about it, it's like the lows were the lowest in the series for me, but the highs were the highest in the series for me this far. And I think I've mentioned this before, but my favorite book in the series as of about 350 pages away through Midnight Tides is book 4, House of Chains. But this is just a book I respect more than I like type thing. The other 5-star books I've given is House of Chains and Dune Messiah, back here, and God Emperor of Dune. Those are the books I gave 5 stars, and that's because I enjoy Dune Messiah a lot, and I think that God Emperor of Dune is probably the best thing that I've ever read, like structure, like just as a book, it's probably the best thing I've ever read. But my favorite thing, I also give Neuromancer a 5 out of 5. So that being said, these ratings are my personal just shorthand of how I'm feeling, because I do this for movies as well, where I rate them out of stars, and then I go back and I look at them and I'm like, do those star ratings still apply? And I don't change them because I don't like reviewing things because reviews are so subjective. I like giving my thoughts because my thoughts are what remain with me. I read this book probably a month ago now, and my memories just keep growing with this book. My thoughts just keep growing and growing and growing, and I'm figuring out what I didn't like, what I liked, and it just keeps changing in my mind, which is why I love this series, because you read it and then you think on it and you marinate on it, and then you find out stuff in later books and contextualize stuff in earlier books, and then you want to read it again. And this, more than any other series, I want to just indulge in. I want to bathe in. I want to read in it. And it wasn't until this book, like they say, the first 3 books are what decides. If you don't like this book, then don't continue on with the series. And I don't know. I'm not the guy to sit here and tell you when to stop and start a series. I think that if you read book 1 and you hate it, don't keep going. If you read book 1, you say, okay, I saw some issues, but book 2, you know, I'd like to pick it up. And you read book 2 and you're like, I don't like it. Then stop. No one's forcing you. Even if fans do say that. So the structure of this video is going to be me going into characters, and when I come across a character that elicits a thought, I'm going to kind of just go on tangents where available. So that's why it's not a review, because I don't want to structure these things. This channel is for spur of the moment, my thoughts on books. I'm trying to... in my last channel, I got very caught up on quality, and I stopped uploading and stopped the passion for the quality. And I want this channel to be pure passion. And so I'm going to get into the first character on my little Memories of Ice notes, and that is Gruntle. Now Gruntle is in an interesting position in my mind, because Gruntle started off, when you're thrown into a new character's perspective like we are with Gruntle, I just kind of go with the flow. I realize that I'm not gonna like this character as much as the pre-established characters. So I'm like, okay, so just rolling with the flow. And honestly, I like everything up until he gets until the first siege of Kapustan. Kapustan. Uh, the caravan in in Kapustan. I love everything with Gruntle up until he becomes basically the mortal sword of Trake. I love all that. And just because I like, he is such a unique character, and what I didn't like about it is that what I didn't like about him becoming the mortal sword is that literally Erickson. Now, I want to say this. I'm not criticizing Erickson for this. This is not criticism towards the author. This is just my opinions on what he wrote. I think that this is an amazing, amazing novel. Again, I gave it 5 stars because it's just so good. But, as a reader, I have tastes and I have different opinions on stuff, and I'm just giving those to you. I'm not these videos are not meant to criticize Erickson. I think that what he has achieved with his book series is phenomenal. I'm just giving my thoughts. I'm just like, kind of see me as like a friend who's just giving you notes on what he thinks. But you don't change for me. You change for the people who know what they're talking about. I'm just a reader, guys. So that being said, I think that stripping away his personality temporarily, and I realized that was a writing choice. That was a choice. That wasn't a flaw in the story. He stripped away because he lost himself in battle. And I think that what makes Gruntle so interesting to read about is his personality, is the way he interacts with Stony, and the way he interacts with Harlow. Rest in peace. May he rest in peace. But yeah, that's what makes Gruntle to me Gruntle. And without that, I kind of got lost in the sauce. And then in the back half of the book, Gruntle wasn't given much not to do, but I mean, the back half of the book is like a march to the next battle. And like, I thought that him and Itgovain, I'll get to Itgovain and I'll talk more about it in his section, but I thought that it was just a little bit lacking in what I wanted. I mean, because I think it's because we have stuff like Akarium and Mappo in the last book that it makes this semi-bromance feel a bit lackluster in comparison. And I mean, I read it, and I gave this book 5 stars. I really enjoy this book. And when I say I gave this book 5 stars, that's my initial reaction. Like, what I'm saying now is my measured response. My initial reaction was, I love this book so much. And, that moves me on to Stony. Now, Stony is one of my favorite characters in this book. I won't say in the series, but in this book, so good. Because she is someone who is very nuanced and layered. Her and Harlow. And then when she loses Harlow and she gets assaulted by one of the, not the tennis gallery, she gets assaulted by one of the upper, anyways, it's been a month or so since I've read this book, so some of the individual plot lines and some moments are going to go over my head. I remember some people commenting on my last video saying, oh, what about this, what about that? And I'm like, oh, I did forget about that. You're right. If you think I'm forgetting something, I probably am. And if you really feel that strongly, you can leave it down in the comments below, and I'll respond to it probably. But Stony was so fun to read about, and such a tragic and interesting character, and that's what Steven Erikson just excels at. Erikson is so good at writing tragically interesting characters that you want to read about and you want to just be happy and succeed in life, and then they're not happy and you're like, please, bro, fix him. Make him happy, make her happy, bro. What? So the next person I want to talk about is Buke. So Buke goes along with Stony and Gruntle. Buke was a particularly interesting plotline. I found that, like, when I was reading about him before his exit from the story, which I found very confusing. I didn't even pick up on it. Maybe I skimmed it a little too much, but I was reading on the wiki. I was like, where is he? And it's like, oh, he flew off in his sparrow form because he couldn't bear the sight of fighting, like the violence going on. And I'm like, okay. And see, that's one of those things where now that I'm looking back on it, I think that I have a certain respect for that storyline, but the enjoyment aspect kind of disappointed me. It's a disappointing plotline because I think that Buke, being this recovered drunk who was on a path to redemption, was a bit more interesting than, holy shit, this is really bad. Because we know it's really bad. We have other eyes, and I guess that is to say, okay, he's okay. And I'm just gonna cover Bouchlane and Corbel Broach in one package deal. I think that they are fine. I probably will not read their short stories anytime soon. And if I do, I'll probably get the physical books, so I'll have to order those online. But they are, like, I do want to read the novels from the Malazan Empire by Ian C. Esselmont, but I don't want to read those novellas anytime soon, really. Next person is Corelli, and I think that Corelli being Karul from the first book is a very awesome reveal. I liked Karul. I liked Karuk. Like, I like Karuk, and what made Karuk so interesting was, in part, Karul, because you have this character of Karuk, and then, like, the mere presence, like the backdrop, this is Karul, right? And just the mere presence of the backdrop of Karul and how he was, like, interacting with Karuk made Karuk a more interesting character, because Karul being, like, a forgotten elder god is just interesting. And we get lore about the Warrens here, and, you know, I'm going to refer to the book guy again, and when he was like, I don't understand the Warrens, right? The Warrens, because, just a coincidence. These are all my D&D books, right? I love D&D. Magic in D&D is just that, magic. You know, you have Brandon Sanderson, who likes to design hard magic systems that are, like, scientifically... like, you can use the magic as a science, but my favorite thing about magic is when it is magic. It's not understood. Like, the reason I love reading about mythology and, like, Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology and Norse mythology is because they take these understandable phenomenon that we now know, like, you know, lightning. Why are lightning gods so amazing? It's because if I didn't know better, I would definitely want to think that there was some dude just chucking lightning because he was angry. That's magic. That's real. That's zest to life. The magic in this world is just potent. And to find out that, you know, there's layers to this. You're figuring out, like, am I supposed to understand Warrens? No, the characters don't understand Warrens. Like, Quick Ben has access to how many? And he doesn't fully understand how Warrens are, like, Karul's blood and his veins and stuff. And it's like, it's so interesting to find out with these very powerful figures who are our friends, essentially, about all of this stuff. So when the book guy says that he gave up on Warrens as a power system, that kind of now that I'm reading it, I watched his video before I read the first one and during reading the first book, and I didn't understand why he had given up, because it's not something you understand. Like, he said that it was like Pokemon types, and, like, if you pull out this Warren, then it cancels out this Warren, and that is not how it is at all. If you're for some reason watching this without having read the books, then I don't know why you're here, first of all, but you're welcome if you want to stick around. Warrens are magic. Like, in the first book, you had Baruch, the alchemist. He used his warren, and then he used a cantrip to light a candle. That is what warrens are. They're not magic. They're not magic in the like Brandon Sanderson sense, in the hard magic system that you can define and map out like a science. They are magic in the what the hell just caused that lightning sense. Like, maybe there's just some angry dude throwing lightning bolts. And that's what I love about Karul, because he is basically he's literally the Warrens personified. He is the lifeblood of the Warrens, and I think that's so interesting. Every time Karul is on screen, I'm reading actively, you know. So now we get back to Itkovain. Now we get back to, you know, characters. Itkovain. Itkovain was interesting because, again, this book does this a few times where we are returning to new characters and then we get new ones mixed in. And Gruntle and Itkovain were those two where I was like rolling along. But Gruntle I warmed up to pretty much second chapter he was in. I was like, okay, I'm down with him. We're good. Itkovain got a little bit of taking used to, and I don't regret my time spent reading his, like, you know, there is some times like Callum in book 2. Callum being alone, regret is the wrong word, right? But I just regret feeling that way. You know, I regret being like, oh, Callum, why can't you just be like, I want to love Callum, right? Now, Itkovain, I think that everything in Kapustan, I think that the Siege of Kapustan is probably, like, sequence-wise, in the first 3 books, the singular best sequence of events that has ever happened. Behind, like, and directly behind it is the Whirlwind in book 2. But it is amazing what he is able to do, what Erikson is able to do, and I think that it's a tragedy that after that we go into such a lackluster journey to Corral. And I think that Itkovain struggles deeply with that because he's introduced alongside 2 other characters that die in the siege, in the first siege. And after that, he's paired up with Gruntle, and I thought that him and Gruntle, they were fine. They were just fine. And I think that Gruntle with Stony and Harlow was better than with Itkovain and Gruntle, and I thought that Itkovain was better with his 2 guys. I'm not going to look their names up, but his 2 guys, the Destrant and the Mortal Sword of Fenner, blank there. Anyways, and I mean, Itkovain's ending was fine, I guess, but I just eventually, like, after the siege of Kapustan, I just did not care about Itkovain. I was like, why is he marching with them again? Oh, because he's, like, lost in life and needs a purpose. And again, this is not a criticism. This is just my thoughts, because I think that it is genuinely, like, probably what would happen. And I do think that, like, Itkovain, that's good. That's good that Itkovain is like that. Yeah, Itkovain, a bit disappointing. His ending with the Talana Mass, interesting, but again, I get meh. Next person is Whiskey Jack. Now, Whiskey Jack in the first book was interesting, but when I say, like, oh, this character was so interesting, I think that Whiskey Jack was kind of understated interesting, because he had a little character arc realizing that his friends were his friends, like his fellow bridge burners were his friends, and the uncovering of the secrets of the assassination plot were really they were pretty interesting. I don't want to say really interesting, but pretty interesting to read about. And in this book, at first, Whiskey Jack is negotiating between Dujik One Arm and Brood and his host, and that's fine. That's okay. And then we get to a certain character named Corlat, and as soon as Corlat and Whiskey Jack start their affair, they're not cheating on anyone, but as soon as they start getting together, they instantly make each other 10 times more interesting. And that is sad to say, because I like Whiskey Jack, But I think that Whiskey Jack, again, on his own, is is it's like bread. You know, bread with alone is fine, and you can enjoy bread alone. But put a little bit of butter on that bread. Put a little bit of butter, and then a little bit of, and then get another piece of bread and put a little bit of peanut butter on it, or jam, peanut butter and jam. And you put those together. You put those two pieces of bread together with a little bit of condiments on inside, and you get something amazing. And I think that's what Corlat and Whiskey Jack do to each other, and it's just good. And another person that happens with Whiskey Jack is Quick Ben. Whenever Quick Ben and Whiskey Jack are together in the first book, in the third book, just so good. And I gotta say, the death of Whiskey Jack. So, I guess I have to describe to you how I enjoy stories. I enjoy stories in a very peculiar way, compared to most people. I should say. I don't mind spoilers. I oftentimes come away from stories enjoying them more when I am spoiled for them. And so on the Malazan wiki, it's the fandom wiki for Malazan. Some wikis list if a character is alive or dead, and this book does not, or this series does not. So it'll say like, you Whiskey Jack. Well, if he is mentioned in book 7, right? He gets a little section for book 7, and so he's probably mentioned in book 8, book 6, book 4, right? So he has sections for all of those. And looking at the wiki, looking at the little bar that's like in Dead House Gate, or in Gardens of the Moon and Dead House Gates in Memories of Ice, I thought that he survived the whole series. So I think I spoiled it right before it happened for myself, and I was like, what? No, no. So I read it and I was like, that is, like, even if I knew it was happening, I think that a hallmark of great writing, Erickson's great writing, right, is that even though I knew it was going to happen, it still shook me. It still gave me pause. It still made me put the book down and breathe and like, oh, wow, that is a lot. It's a lot. And Whiskey Jack in this book is probably top 5 best characters in this whole book. It's just amazing what he's able to do. And I mean, it's so understated, at least for me. I like, Whiskey Jack was never my favorite from the first book. I liked, Perrin and Crocus and Brood, and Rake and all of these people more than Whiskey Jack. Even Quick Ben and Callum shined more in the first book, I found, than Whiskey Jack did. But in this book, he just... Now, if you've never read God Emperor of Dune, you should know that book has 2 action scenes, basically, and it is all 3. And it's all mostly just 2 guys, 2 different people, the God Emperor and someone else talking for most of the book. It's philosophical musings, and it's amazing. I love it so much. And that's what I thought Whiskey Jack did really well, is that he wasn't involved in the fighting, he was involved in the conversations. And those slow moments of conversations are what I like best in stories, just across the board, basically. So yeah, that's Whiskey Jack. Now on to Perrin. I think that Perrin started out a little bit slow with the sickness and the stuff, and and it's always hard most of the time in stories when you have a character that's like, oh, if they would just do this, and the story tells you that they just have to do this one thing to get better and to like fix their situation, and you're just waiting for them to do that one thing. And so the Master of the Deck, that whole thing with the table floating, that was very intriguing. The birth of a new card is very instrumental in the Crippled God's plans. Like, we needed to see the birth of a new card. And the way that contextualizes Kalinved and Dancer's ascension to become Shadow Throne and Cotillion, like the rope and Cotillion, was very interesting as well. It like, that's what I love about this world, is you're able to get like one piece of information, like a juxtaposition with Tool and the other Talana Mass, and it world builds. He doesn't tell you, he just says, oh, Tool is a bit strange for Talana Mass, and then you're like, you see other Talana Mass, and you're like, yeah, he is. He kind of is. And that's the same thing with Perrin, is like, you see how an ascension happens, and then you realize that, oh, so this is what's going to happen going forward. Not Ascension, but like you see how a new card gets added to the deck of dragons. And yeah, Perrin, he's kind of just Perrin is always going to be is a character determined by who he's around. That's why I didn't feel that close to him in the first book. Whenever he was with Lauren in the first book, so good. When he was with Talk in the first book, when he was with all these people, that was when he's best. And him alone, he isolates himself quite a lot in this book. But whenever he's with the Bridge Burners, it's really good. Next person is Picker. Now, Picker and Fiddler were kind of chosen to be the two POV characters inside the common ranks of the Bridge Burners. And I think that Fiddler is my favorite character in the entire series, and Picker is okay. Her and Blend, I like their dynamic. I think that her observations into the rest of the Bridge Burners are very insightful, and it's fine. I like Picker, but nothing much to say. I think that the bands were cool, and meh. Next is Quick Ben, and as always, I'm gonna put Quick Ben and Telemandus in like a pair here. I think that Quick Ben is always interesting. You learn a lot more about his backstory here. It is amazing. Like, you can tell that a lot of these characters were player characters in a D&D campaign, because in D&D you always set up a character with intrigue and plot relevance in their backstory, and you can tell which ones were just kind of, like they were just kind of NPCs, or like people who are more important in the novels than they were in the games because of the backstories and stuff. Like Whiskey Jack, for example, you find out that Whiskey Jack was played by Ian C. Esselmont to kind of just flesh out the squad of Marines, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, he's a captain, or he's whatever he is. He's a higher up who was I think he was a mason or something. Anyways, he was like a worker, and then he got elevated. And versus Callum, Fiddler, and all of these people who, like, I guess not Fiddler, but Callum and Quick Ben, who have these very protagonisty backgrounds, which it makes Quick Ben all the more. I'm not. This is not a complaint. It's just an observation. And one of my favorite things about this entire series is seeing those little things, oh, that was a D&D remnant, or that was like a role playing remnant. Oh, ooh, and that's like half the fun of the first and second book for me was, or at least the first book was like, so the Jag are just like orcs. That's such an interesting take on how you do orcs. Oh my god. And so the T-Star elves, that's because it's just different than what I'm used to playing in D&D. In D&D I'm used to playing basically Tolkienian elves and Tolkienian orcs and all that. So to see them done differently is very fun. And to see Quick Ben done in such a protagonisty way, yet not have him be at the forefront of the story, is so fun as well. But I do want to take this moment to talk about the poisoning of the Warrens. I thought that was a little bit of an iffy plot device. Again, this isn't criticism. This is just my thoughts. I think that the story works the way he set it up. Actually, I need to take a drink. I'm recording for 29 minutes. I'm going to leave this in. Take a break with me. Okay. Yeah, the poisoning of the Warrens, it's fine. It's fine. It's whatever. And now Brood. So, I still have to make this video. I talked about it in the last video, but the way that Ascendants are introduced, you have Rake, who is stoic, and, such, like, he is Rake. And then you get introduced to Brood in this book, and then you realize, oh, that's a Rake thing. Oh, that's a... Okay. That's a Rake... Like, he's... Not all Ascendants are that old. Brood is very human. He has human flaws, and Rake is able to keep himself bound so tightly that no one's able to penetrate, and even start to think about what he's thinking about. No one's able to penetrate his mind, not even his fellow Teast, because he's so bound tight. And then you see Brood, who has a temper, and he loses his temper at Karuk, and it's just so. Brood, every time he was on screen, was a highlight of the book. That's where I'll finish with that. Next person is Rake, and I thought that Rake was a lot less in this book than he was in Gardens of the Moon, and I liked him a lot more in Gardens of the Moon. I think that I will just say that the full unveiling in Black Corral and the way he used Moonspawn, probably my biggest complaint of the book, honestly, is Black Corral and the Battle of Corral. I thought that was borderline bad. I thought I did not like the ending of this book at all. But the things that came before it, literally, I think that this has one of the best battles in the series and one of the worst battles in the series to rival Chapter 10 of Deadhouse Gate's bad. Again, this isn't criticism, because some people love this story, and a lot of what I hear is, the endings of these books are so good, and only Deadhouse Gates has really properly satisfied me in most ways. I will just say, spoiler for the next video, but House of Chains also, I really like the ending to that, but just the way that Race switched bodies in the first book, and then how what it was is that it was the constant switching of POVs on a paragraph to paragraph basis, because damn, let us chill. But not being able to understand why Rake is doing something, it would be nice to have Corlat be like, what the hell, Rake, why are we gonna sacrifice Moonspawn? And then Rake just be like, I think that the Teast people are being trapped by Moonspawn, and because clearly he wants the progression of the Teast people I guess I should call them the Andi people. He wants the progression of the Andi people beyond the walls of Moonspawn, where they just dwell in their sorrow. You see what happens to the ones on the front lines, and at least they have something to do with their lives. They're not just wallowing in semi-immortality, right? And I mean, I understand that, but when I'm reading it and when I think back to it, I go, that is stupid, man. Why would you just, and I know he didn't know that there was people in there, but Moonspawn is so goddamn cool. Why do you? Anyways, that's just complaints. Again, not criticism. I think that I think that Erickson's books are phenomenal. Again, I gave this 5 stars. I still love this book so much, and it's probably it's my second. It's my third favorite, but what are you gonna do when I'm only 4 books in, right? Next person is Calor. I saw a review of this and said, how could no one see Calor's betrayal? I kind of got the sense that Calor was always just an asshole, and that when he starts talking crazy, people are like, yeah, that's just how Calor talks. He's an asshole, he's crazy, but he's really good at tactics. That at least that's what I thought. And so, the seduction of the crippled god. I have a whole section planned to talk about the crippled god, anyways. But his seduction to kind of the dark side, he was already there. But I think it's such an interesting dynamic that he's such an ancient figure who is responsible for the deaths of Nightchill, and Draconis. The power of a curse. I don't think he's a particularly powerful mage, but that's what I like about the magic of this world, is that in the first book you had stuff like wax witches, and in this you have a curse that just because he's so powerful, he's able to do this. And he's like, well, we curse you to, they're like, we curse you to immortality. And he's like, well, I curse you to die, and to be forgotten. And that is, that's interesting. So I'm really excited to see Calor again. His betrayal of Whiskey Jack, or his killing of Whiskey Jack, it's one of those things where, like, he's doing his job as a villain so well. Like, I don't hate him. I'm excited to read more about him because I think that he's a tremendous force in the universe that deserves more exploration for me as a reader. Like, I know that I read a bit of the notes on the wiki as to the D&D campaign roots of Calor and how he was kind of like a reoccurring villain. So obviously, Cam and Erickson, they know a lot more. I guess I shouldn't. I guess I should call him Esselmont. Esselmont and Erickson know a lot more about Calor than I do right now. As a book, I'm on book 5, and they're clearly not sharing it. And that's just one of those things where I'm like, give it to me, please, please give me more Calor. Next, I'll talk about Meeb. The Meeb. That's how I'm going to say it, by the way. I do not know. I tried some different pronunciations while reading it, and the Meeb stuck. What is there to say? Motherhood, such an interesting... And again, this is why magic works so well for me in this series, that it literalizes, it makes literal concepts that we take for granted every day, that kids drain the life from their parents and take away stuff. Like, they just carve out chunks of who they were as people and leave it on the wayside, and they have to keep going. And that is so interesting. Now, one other complaint I have about Erickson's writing is that he leaves every single plot line until the end to finish. So one thing that really also got under my skin about the Battle of Corral is that we kept cutting back to the Meeb, Cole, and Marulio and showed them. I think that if you resolve the Meeb's plotline before, not fully, right? Before or after the Battle of Corral, you would have saved so much. Like, you could have had the battle end and then cut back, finish the Meeb, and then cut back to the result, like the after battle of Corral. And I think that I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. Again, I'm not suggesting edits. I'm just saying, like, I think that my enjoyment would have, but that's not the book I read, right? So the book I read felt a little bit like disjointed in, I liked the Meeb until she started tripping the other plot lines. I liked it until she started taking away from the other stuff I was enjoying. And that leaves me with kind of a sour taste in my mouth, not for the character, but for the plot lines. How her plot was implemented was just a little bit clumsy, in my opinion. I thought the Meeb was so interesting to read about until she started tripping other plot lines. Next character is Silver Fox. Yeah, Silver Fox is definitely a character. I had a lot of interest. I looked at, like, when Tattersail dies. I did not talk about Tattersail in my Gardens of the Moon video because, it's like cool in book 2 where he's important right up until he dies, and then he's not important again ever. And that's kind of Tattersail, except she is really important, technically. But she's not. Technically she is, but she's not. And so I'll just kind of add an addendum, like, Tattersail and Gardens of the Moon, up until her death, I was really interested in. And then she dies, and it first of all, it left me flabbergasted. Burladan's standing in front of her like, yeah, you're coming back with me, or you're gonna die. And I'm like, main character, she's main character. I heard that there's deaths in the series, but you just don't do it like this in the middle of the, oh my god, she burned, oh my. Okay. Oh, what happens to her? Silver Fox. So I go to Silver Fox Wiki and I'm like, what? I don't understand. And then you read the book and you're like, okay. Maybe not the direction I would have chosen, but that's why I'm not writing this story. That's why Erikson is writing the story. Sometimes even though I have complaints about the author's hand and how the story turned out eventually, I gotta sit back, and as a reader, I gotta let Erikson cook. For lack of a better term, I gotta let him cook, and he cooked with Silver Fox. There's a little bit of complaints where I can be like, well, I thought that the second gathering was a little bit underwhelming. I thought that that her decision, I thought that there was a little bit here and there, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, it could have been so much worse. He could have messed it up so much. He didn't mess it up. I'm not saying that, but he could have. And so what we got, I'm happy with it. And that's the thing, that Icovane that comes in here and kind of steps on the toes and muddies the waters, and it's just like, I don't think the waters need to be muddied. I don't think that needed to happen, but obviously Erikson did, because it happened, and this is the book I'm reading. It did happen. I'm not reading a book where it didn't, so I'm not going to sit here and say it shouldn't have, because that's not the book. So Silver Fox, I really liked her. I thought that the interesting dynamic between Nightchill and Tattersail was interesting, because it's one of those things where Paul and Leto II in the Dune series, right? That's interesting because without those ancestral memories, they're not the characters we know now. Without both not both, but Nightchill, Burladan, the child, and Tattersail, we don't have Silver Fox as we know her. So I mean, you got to take the good with the bad, right? And the debate whether Silver Fox was good to keep around or not, and that whole scene with Rake and how he was gonna kill, he was Calor was kind of not convincing him, but he was hearing him out, because Rake, that's what Rake does, is he makes decisions based off his own thoughts on the situation. And Silver Fox's progression from kid to adult was very satisfying. You could tell that Erikson changed the way he wrote her to very much define the rapid aging process. That was very awesome. Next, I'm going to go to Corlat. I think that Corlat's plot was interesting. I forgot that Corlat was in in Gardens of the Moon until I read her wiki, but I think that she is interesting in. Now, this is one of the few characters where I guess I should explain this a bit more, but I like Corlat alone. Once Whiskey Jack dies and leaves her with that pit in her stomach, that was awesome. I like Corlat when she's alone, but not because of her as a character. It's because she's a window into the Andi race, the Tista-Andi race, and semi-immortality as a concept. Just she can explore that really well in a way that Whiskey Jack, explores friendship and war. Well, I hate to break it to you, Whiskey Jack, but half the characters, more than half, most of the characters here explore war in some way or another. Corlat gives a very interesting insight into how these things develop, how these sentiments of semi-immortality develop. And one complaint that I personally have, and I've heard that a lot of fans have over the series, is that the romance is quite weak, and I think that I want to give Erikson the benefit of the doubt and say he knows, because for example, in Gardens of the Moon, it is portrayed as a heat of the moment thing between Tattersail and Perrin, and then in this book they're confronted, and Perrin says, I probably did get caught up in the moment, because looking back now, it was a little thing in my life that happened, and then you died, and then I moved on, and I'm not going to regress. I'm not going to go back in time for anyone. And then in Deadhouse Gates, you have Duiker and that woman who they share or they share maybe 1 or 2 nights or whatever, and then it's a heat of the moment thing, and like Corlat and Whiskey Jack are like, we both need to bone, we both need someone to lean on, and so they choose each other, and that from that blossoms an amazing relationship that I love to read about. Like, I won't let anyone tell me, and I won't let my own like immediate feelings say that dictate that Erickson is bad at writing romance, because it's just he's writing in a field, in a place, in a time when romance can't blossom with grace. It blossoms in clumsy, messy, erratic spats of here and here and here, and I think that Corlat perfectly exemplifies that, and I loved reading about her. Next person is Hatan. I just wanted to, you know, Hatan is Barghast. I thought that plot line was interesting. The bridge burners go into the Barghast lands, and like Trot's fight with so and so. I forget his name again. I've read this book a month ago. Very interesting, but Hatan and her kind of beddings, right? I thought that was very interesting because it takes down masculinity a peg. It's like, what happens when the woman is outmanning? Now I put quotation marks because sexuality is, or hypersexuality is inherently non-masculine, but in this world and in our own even, it is seen as a masculine trait, and for that to be challenged, and for the most non-masculine character, Karuk, to overcome this hypersexuality and this not lust, because it's not, I don't think it's born out of lust for her. I think it's born out of power, a desire for power, a desire for control over people she sees as a challenge to her authority. And by bedding them, forcibly or otherwise, not forcibly, she doesn't like rape anyone technically, but I don't know. Forget that I said that, because that is very dubious. It's very blurred lines. No one sits there and went, I'm a fundamentally altered person, and like regrets it. Like, they're like, oh my god, she was brutal, man. But this is a bad topic to get on. I read this book a month ago. I do not remember enough. I don't remember enough of the fine details to make this discussion proper. So if I got something really wrong, I'm officially retracting that statement. So yeah, Hatan, cool character, dubious consent. Whatever. It's a book series. Karuk, I think I talked about this in Cruel section, but Karuk is my favorite, like one of my favorite characters. Like, he's definitely top 3. I think Fiddler and Karuk are definitely top 3. Probably Fiddler, Crocus, and I won't choose that second one bit, but he is definitely, I think Karuk is my second favorite character in the whole series, because every time he just rambles, I love the way he speaks. You know, friend Karuk, I talk like that. I'm like, hey, friend Owen, what's up? Hey, friend Tyler, what's up? You know, love reading about him. Love every time he's on screen with him and Hatan, Brood, and Meeb, and Cruel even. Just good. I've been recording for 50 minutes. Holy shit. Next, we go to there's so many good sections in this book, but like, so I'm going to talk about Talk first. Talk the Younger. Talk about disappointment. Talk in the first book was great. He was the everyman who was like damaged in his eye by directly by the machinations. Like, he's lucky to have survived in reality. And when he got thrown into that portal and he was proclaimed to have died, I went on the wiki and I spoiled myself, because I was like, no way. You know, I get that thing where I'm like, no, that's not true. And then I go look at it and I'm like, I was right. Should I have looked at that? That might have been an awesome reveal for the third book. But it's whatever. I knew he wasn't dead. And like everything with Lady Envy, so good. Second best sequence in like the entire book. Really, really great sequence of events. Every time Lady Envy talked, Tool, all those guys were on screen. Loved reading it. As soon as he split up from Lady Envy, he becomes literally the most boring thing to read about, alongside the Meebs wolf running away from wolves chapters, sections of her chapters, becomes the most boring thing to read about, because he's not close enough to Penny and Seer to be able to strip away the layer, to be able to see him as a character, right? Like we understand who Penny and Seer is without needing to see him. What we do need to see is we need to see beyond the monster that he is portrayed as, by everyone else. One thing that Talk's thing does do is he humanizes one of the Seer Damen. That's what they're called, Seer Damen. The one who takes it. Anyways, the matron, the Chan and Mal or whatever, the raptor mother matron. Talk, one of the most disappointing characters of this book. That's what I mean, is this book is so good. Like, Talk's section in the early books, in the early book, was so good. And then it was so meh. It was so bleh. I don't want to call it bad, because I don't think it's bad. I think that it does a lot of things in service of the overall story and narrative, but it just, And then there's Lady Envy. Again, I love Lady Envy. She made the sections with Talk and Tool. I think that Talk and Tool would have worked well on their own. But Lady Envy, Talk and Tool, and the Slayu? I don't know. The masked guys. So good. So good. So good. And then there's Tool. Tool continues his streak of being, one of my favorite characters of the book, hovering just out of like my top few spots. Tool is just amazing. Every time he's on screen, I love reading about whoever he is. And he deepens the knowledge of the Talana Mass. And in the first two books, Tool was our only real reference point for the Talana Mass. And in this book, we start to get a feel for people who aren't Tool, a Mass who aren't Tool. And at the end, when he is revealed to be closer in nature to the Barghest, as like, because one thing that's really interesting is the genealogy, the descendants, how everyone came to be, how humans came to be, how Jag came to be, how, Barghast and Tholoman Toblakai and all these people came to be, because we know the progenitor races. We know the Forkasai died out pretty early on. We know that Chalana Mal can't really have anything to do with humans. We know that Talana Mas, some of them survived. We know that later on in the fourth book we learn about, or maybe it's in the fifth book. I think it's in both the fourth and fifth. We learn about the race that humans probably did descend from. I forget their name, but you if you read the books, you know what I'm talking about. And yeah, just so interesting to read about all this stuff, and that's what's constantly going through my mind when I'm reading Tool. Beyond just the fun character and the juxtaposition of the undead guy, or trying humor, because he's human. He's more human than we care to realize, but it's just that visual layer of humanity has been decayed, not stripped away, but morphed into something wholly unnatural. And I guess the last character, I'll talk about Penny and Seer first. Penny and Seer and his whole plotline with the Rent and the Rent of Morn and the Chalanamal or whatever. I'm never. When they become more relevant, I'll research them later on, and come up with the pronunciation. But the dinosaurs, the dinosaur matron and him, I didn't really care about him until like the very end. And I know that's what you're supposed to do. Like, he's not supposed to be this very likable figure, but I mean, I think that Talk could have really humanized him, could have taken him to not a different level, but just give him like a little, like he was like this, and then you turn over and he's like hand thick, right? But he could have been like this, and then you turn him over and he's 2 hands thick. But he's not. He's 1 hand thick of a character, and it's whatever. I think that he worked well for the figurehead of the Penny and Damen and the villain we have to defeat, but it was okay. And then the Crippled God, I was shocked when I saw the Crippled God making as many moves as he did in this book, because you have a 10-book series, and I guess I'm a little bit used to, for example, Game of Thrones, where even though it's only 5 books in length, like we do not know the main threat of the books at all. It takes so long for us to even, understand what's truly the real threat of the series, and and even with Dune, we don't learn who the true threat of the universe is until I think book 6. I think the final book is literally when like the main villain and like everything that has happened up until the point makes sense. And so to see the Crippled God introduced so thoroughly and so quickly and like effectively into this story was refreshing. And it really is like, you look at 10 books and you're on the 3rd book and you're like, okay, I've got a lot more to go. And he just really said, like, it's worth it. It's already been worth it a lot of the times. These 3 books have so much information packed into them that there's payoff and setup in just these 3 books. And I'm already seeing more setup, and I'm already anticipating more payoff. And so I have that trust in Erickson now. And the Crippled God, I guess I can't really talk about him as a character. That'll probably be in book 10 where I talk about him. But him as a kind of a plot device is just amazing. I think that Erickson knocked it out of the park with everything to do with Crippled God in this story. But yeah, that's all I have on my list for Memories of Ice. Wow, I had a lot to say about this book. This book, again, like it is the highest highs and lowest lows of the whole series. I think that Black Corral was a bit of a mess of a final climax. I thought that it switched way too fast between POVs. But I think that Kapustan was probably one of the best sequences, that single-handedly one of the best sequences he's ever written. It's such an amazing book. It holds such a unique place in my heart. I rated it 5 stars because, like, as much as I had problems and I had sit here and complain about them and wish they were different, the book itself is so good. I can't sit there and in good conscience tell you that it's not one of the best books I've ever read, Anyways, thank you all for watching. I guess like and subscribe if you made it this far, because you watched like 58 minutes of me talk, so you might want to watch more in the future or in the past. Yeah, thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.